Hello everyone, welcome to Study Buzz. This is Nikita and I'm thrilled to share this new video with you to make your verbal section much easier. But before we delve into today's content, make sure to hit that subscribe button and follow us on our Instagram channel and press bell icon to receive important videos updates. You can also follow us on our Instagram channel, which is studybuzz_education, and the other handles as is mentioned on your screen. You can also download our app, which is also given on the screen. Now let's move on to the video. Topic for this video is going to be inference based questions and specific detail based questions. These are the two type of questions which are very common in reading comprehension, and each and every reading comprehension that you get in all the examination is going to have at least one of each, but mostly multiples, as in two questions of each types. Let's first talk about inference based questions and then compare them to specific detail question. So, inference based questions are actually the questions that require you to deduce information, right? It requires you to deduce the information that is not given explicitly in the passage, right? Like main idea questions that were discussed in the last video, they ask for the central point which can be found from the information which is already there. They are mentioned in there, whether explicitly or impliedly or directly. But when we compare that to inference based questions require you to infer something, as in to deduce something. They require you to deduce the information which is not mentioned or stated, not explicitly stated in the passage, which means the answer that you're looking for is not written in the passage. Something related to that, some information related to that is given to you, and you will be required to think, apply logic, and then reach some inference, deduce something, and that will be your answer depending upon the options that are given to you, right? So essentially, inference based questions are asking you to make logical conclusions based on information from the passage, right? So what we can understand here is that there will be facts which are there in the passage, that is text which is already written in the passage given to you. On it you will apply your logic, right? You will apply the logic, and that logic, the combination of these two things, will give you inference, which is required for the question, right? To solve the question, they essentially just simply test your ability to comprehend these subtle points and implicit messages in the text. When we are doing these kind of question, we need to be very comfortable with what is written there. We need to understand and comprehend the passage nicely and in context which is required. We cannot just simply understand according to what we think is correct. We cannot have preconceived notions while understanding for inference based questions. We have to understand and comprehend these things in the manner, in the context that the author intended, for which we must take help of tone and type of the passage and the contextual vocabulary that is used. We should be able to understand the passage in overall context and tone and pay attention to details and nuances, so that we do not add our own opinions to it, which, if we add our own opinions, it will ultimately lead to wrong logical application, right? Furthermore, we should be able to identify the clues which are hidden in the text. So as we just said that explicitly it is not stated, the inference based questions answers are not explicitly stated, but there is something which is given to you related to it. So there are clues which are given to you, there are hints which are given to you. Author often uses very specific language to imply rather than say outright, right? So we have to pay attention to those things, and then we can have our answers, right? A lot of times it does happen that inference based questions are formed not directly. They might ask you what exactly is the author implying, what is the passage implying, either this, or they can ask you in the manner like what does the author suggest, or what does this phrase mean, or author would support which of the following statements, or the passage might continue this which of these following ideas, right? So all of these things, they are in inference based questions or implied ideas they are asking for you, right? So this is how we are supposed to look for the questions and identify that these are the questions which are inference based questions. If we are not able to understand what exactly is the question asking, we can also paraphrase, right? We can restate the question in our own words to ensure that we understand what is being asked, right? Then furthermore, we need to rely on evidence, right? We need to rely on evidence. See, we just now discussed that facts and logic both are required. Logic is something which we will put on from our mind. Facts are given from the passage. Hence, facts that we are using, they are although not stating the information that we require explicitly, but they are providing us with hints, and those hints are the evidences that we require. So we must, the answer that we have chosen to be the correct answer, we must comply it, we must check it from the evidences which is there in the passage. We must base our information, we must base our inference on the evidence provided in the passage and avoid making assumptions, right? Because assumptions are also not explicitly stated. So we must make inferences based on evidence in the passage and not assumptions or introduce outside knowledge. Outside knowledge as in knowledge outside of the passage, right? Also, we must always think about author's intent, as in we must always consider why author included certain details or certain specific language. What exactly is the purpose of it? What are they implying or what are they suggesting? This again is linked to comprehension and will be aided by context as well as tone, right? So this is how we are supposed to approach. These are the general ideas for approaching inference based questions. This is what the question requires from us. As compared to specific detail question, they are on the exact opposite spectrum. In inference based questions, the information was not explicitly mentioned and we were required to deduce it. However, here it is explicitly there, explicitly mentioned, which means that specific detail questions are the kind of questions that we used to find in our school books, right? During the school there used to be these kind of questions, right? That there was a chapter and then there were 5 or 6 questions behind the chapter that teacher used to ask us to mark the answers from the chapter itself. These are the specific detail questions. Answers for these questions are already given to us in the passage. We do not need to think about it. We do not need to apply any kind of logic on it. We just need to go back to the passage and mark the answer. For example, if there is a date given in the passage, like author was born on this particular date, and then the question asks when was the author born, so you can just simply go to the passage and mark the answer accordingly. This is what we mean by specific detail question. We do not need to think about it. We can just simply mark the answer as is. This is how inference and specific detail questions oppose each other. Inference is something that we need to deduce using logic. It is not explicitly mentioned. However, or exactly opposite to that is specific detail. We need to directly mark the answers because they are explicitly mentioned in the passage. Now let's look at some of the questions. Let's look at one of the question for inference based one first, the direct inference based question. This is from Zat. Please pause and try to solve it. So it says, people who work in law, hotel and food services and technology were found the most likely to skip breakfast daily, according to a recent study. As for people who do eat breakfast and prefer a savory type like an egg, the study found they tend to make more money, be night owls, and prefer cats over dogs. If you prefer a sweet breakfast like a donut, you tend to be a morning person like rom-coms and are a dog person. Right, so this is the small little paragraph that is given to us, and then the question asks, which of the following can be best inferred based on the above paragraph? Let's look through the options. Option A says, a preference for cats as pets over dogs usually is a result of eating eggs for breakfast daily. See, this option, paragraph does not state that anyone who prefers cats over dogs eats eggs for breakfast. It simply says the opposite of that, right? So we cannot have this option as an answer. The paragraph only states that people who prefer eggs for breakfast also tend to prefer cats over dogs, right? So the logic that is applied here is wrong. There is a wrong analogy that is being applied, right? Which is why this is obviously the incorrect answer. Second, among regular breakfast eaters, early risers have more sugar in their breakfast than late risers. See, the paragraph does not talk about sugar intake at all. We only are talking about the preference, right, of the food. So if it is not being talked about in the passage itself, the inference required fact plus logic, right? Here the logic was wrong, so the answer was wrong. Here the fact is not present in the passage. If this is not present, then also the answer is wrong. Both of these needs to be correct. IT professionals who eat eggs for breakfast are more likely to make more money than their counterparts who eat donuts for breakfast. This is conveyed by the passage itself, and in the exact same sense. It literally says in the passage, right? All of the things are mentioned, all of the elements checks out. So we can keep it aside for now. There is a very high probability of this being the answer. Now the next one says, lawyers who eat savory breakfast daily make more money than those lawyers who have early breakfast daily. The paragraph does not mention that people who eat early breakfast make less money, right? Early and late breakfast is not being talked about, is not being distinguished in the sense of money in the passage. Hence, the fact is lacking, right? The fact is again lacking, which means not the answer. Hoteliers who eat regular breakfast are more likely to make more money than those who watch rom-coms regularly. The passage does not talk at all about people watching rom-coms regularly, right? It only says that people who prefer sweet breakfast tend to like rom-com, right? So again, the logic is lacking in this particular option. So it is also not the answer, which means that this is the answer that we're looking for. This checks out from the passage. I hope this is clear to you. Let's have a couple more questions, right? Please pause and try to solve it. This one is also a ZAT previous year question. Right, so we have a very short paragraph, right? And the question is, which of the following best reflects the author's understanding of human perception of pleasure, right? Human perception of pleasure. Right, so let's talk about it. So this passage, I think, is basically reflecting on how modern experiences enhanced by technology and synthetic creations have altered our perception and capacity for pleasure when compared to simpler pastimes, right? So breaking down this particular passage into the paragraphs, we can understand some key points. So the first paragraph is basically just talking about cathedral organ music, which used to once represent the pinnacle of human-made sound. When it went on to medieval peasants, it would have been deeply, like medieval peasants, they would have been very deeply impressed by these kind of experiences and possibly also influence their beliefs, right? The cathedral organ music we're talking about, right? Now when we come to the modern life, it bombards us with sounds and experiences which are far more intense than they used to be in the past, right? Again, comparing it to the concerts and the cathedral organ music, right? And the comparison of historical natural rewards like finding honey, the example that is given here, with the modern synthetic rewards as in the commercial foods and the drugs, etc., which provides us very intense sensations, right? This is what the first para is about. And then the second para, essentially the author is talking about the concept of habituation. It explains that there is constant exposure to intense and artificial stimuli, which leads to very diminished ability to appreciate simple and natural pleasures, right? There are two major consequences in this particular para, in the second para. First, that we became less sensitive to subtle natural sources of pleasure, such as the beauty of the autumn leaves and the meaningful glances, those kind of things. And then the second was, we eventually became habituated even to the intense artificial experiences, which led to an insatiable craving for more simulation, right? The more we consume, the more we desire, creating a cycle of increasing demand for pleasure, which is never fulfilled. So overall, this particular passage contrasts that the simplicity and scarcity of intense experiences in the past with the overwhelming and constant stimulation of present modern life. It argues that our overexposure to powerful synthetic stimuli, artificial stimuli, has led to diminished capacity to enjoy natural and subtle pleasures, and has resulted in the cycle that we just talked about, that increasing desire, that results in increasing desire and dissatisfaction, right? And this particular cycle is driven by what? Habituation, right? Which leaves us constantly wanting and seeking for more intense experiences, and again we become habituated to that, and it leads to sense of emptiness and unfulfilled longing. This is the passage, this is what the passage is talking about. Now let's look at the question. Which of the following options best reflect author's understanding of human perception of pleasure? Now, I believe that we can already mark the answer accordingly, right? Let's see. Let's read the options. Pleasure comes from whatever we are exposed to for the first time. Again, that is not how the passage states it, right? Author says that we feel habituated and find it very mundane when we consume something again and again, right? And hence, it results in loss of pleasure. Opposite of mundane is extraordinary, right? If we look at this option, it says pleasure comes from what is perceived to be extraordinary. According to the passage, if I compare option A and option E, E becomes the better option, because A, it says that for the first time. For this is not directly there in the passage. The clues required for being exposed for the first time is not there in the passage. Hence, it becomes not so good for an option to be answered, right? Pleasure comes from what appears to be a valuable discovery or invention. Again, this was used as an example, not in this sense, not in the same context. Comes from what we are accustomed to. This is directly opposite to what the passage marks. Again, not the answer. Comes from what we are deprived of. We have no idea about this. There is no data which says how deprivation works. So, we can again not mark this as an answer. So, if I compare, this becomes my only possible answer, right? Because author literally said that we become habituated and it became mundane. We start to find it very mundane when we consume something again and again, right? Now, mundane, the opposite is extraordinary, and according to author, it is very clear that the pleasure comes from something which we perceive to be extraordinary. So, this becomes the answer that we are looking for, right? Let's move on and do one specific detailed question of the same passage so that we can understand the difference easily. Right. So, this particular question says, which of the following options best describe emptiness as described in the passage? Option A, feeling evoked by the carefully designed commercial foods alluring us to them, right? Author has not talked about only foods, right? He just uses them as one of the example. So if that is the case, then it could not be the best description, right? Hence, an example cannot be used. It is not mentioned in the same context. Inevitability of habituation that one gets from repeated consumption of man-made foods or drugs. Again, the same reason, the context is not correct, so not there. It is not used in the same context as emptiness. Then, a feeling of absence of source of pleasure when extant sources are in abundance. This is exactly what the passage also overall states, as well as it is directly there in the passage. So, it is marked in the exact same context as well. So this could be the answer that we're looking for. Yearning for newer sources of pleasure when extant sources are in abundance. See, yearning for new sources is the consequence of emptiness and not the meaning of emptiness. So this is incorrect. A feeling of weariness around extant sources of pleasure that are in abundance. Author does not talk about weariness at all. Hence, it is impossible to be related to emptiness in any way. So this can also not be the correct answer, which means the correct answer becomes what? This. Right? So you might have seen that we just did not simply choose the answer based on what is written. We also compared the context here, right? So we also need to pay attention to the context in these kind of questions. We need to see that yes, it is mentioned in the passage, but is it mentioned in the exact same context, in the exact same way as it is asked in the question? And then only we can mark the answers, right? It has to be used for the same manner, for the same way, for the same context as is asked in the question. I hope this is clear to you. Hope this was good. All the best. See you next time.